From Illinois Public Media, this is the 21st Show. I'm Brian Mackey. And we begin today with the United States Congress. Early this morning, the Senate voted 51 to 48 to support President Trump's request to take back funding of public radio and television, among other things. That sets up a final vote in the House of Representatives, which already approved taking back the money last month. Meanwhile, we're still learning more about what the One Big Beautiful Bill Act will mean for people in Illinois and beyond. We've talked on the show about cuts to Medicaid and SNAP or food stamps, but the legislation also has major effects on rural hospitals, clean energy, and more. Yesterday afternoon, I talked about that with Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski. She's a Democrat who represents Illinois' 13th district, which starts in the Metro East, moves north to Springfield, then heads east through Decatur and Champaign-Urbana. Again, in order to accommodate her schedule, we spoke Wednesday afternoon. No calls because of that, but let us know what you thought by emailing talk@21stshow.org. Congresswoman Budzinski, welcome back to the 21st Show. This is the first chance we've had to talk since the passage of the OBBBA. What have you been hearing from constituents about how this law is going to affect them?
Well, I'm hearing a lot of anxiety. I was at home all last week visiting with social service providers in Decatur, those that are providing, affordable housing, those in particular that have been addressing some of the food insecurity that's in central and southern Illinois. I visited with the food bank actually in Champaign. What I'm hearing is that the need is going up right now in our communities for assistance, and there's very serious concern about shortages and us not being able to meet those needs. I think that this bill is going to exacerbate that problem where we saw hundreds of billions of dollars of cuts to SNAP assistance for working people. And then, you layer on top of that the cuts that I'm very concerned about related to Medicaid. So I've been talking to our healthcare providers in the district. We coordinated a call on Monday. We had over 50 different participants throughout the district where we're just trying to be a resource to them, but a lot of questions, a lot of anxiety about what's going to come after this bill has now become law.
And we have also talked to, as you say, food bank people, healthcare providers. What about everyday people? Do you get the sense that people have an idea about what may be coming, changes to benefit programs that millions of Illinoisans rely on?
I do. I mean, I hear from constituents that to share the same anxieties that some of the organizations you mentioned just did. The real concern, I think, it's hitting home for people that it isn't just about this bill. Of course, what's going to happen with this bill is it's going to bring into concern how people are going to afford health care. Premiums are going to go up. There seems to be an awareness for folks that they're concerned about that. I'm hearing concerns from people that related to long-term care. This is going to dramatically impact our nursing homes within the district as well, concerns around closure. But beyond this bill, too, what you're seeing this administration also do is cut some really foundational, fundamental programs that working people rely on, too. LIHEAP, for example, is something that is really top of mind for a lot of people. This bill that passed, and signed into law by President Trump, led by Republicans, is going to drive up the cost of energy. It's going to make healthcare more expensive, and it's going to negatively impact a lot of the same person. And those are working people that are just struggling to make ends meet. So hearing from a lot of people, both individual constituents, but organizations as well.
You mentioned Medicaid cuts earlier. What happens to rural hospitals, right? We talk about these benefit programs and sometimes as though, people are getting the benefits, right? Like the way, they can spend the money on a TV or whatever. But really this money goes to healthcare providers when we talk about Medicaid. Talk about what may be coming for rural hospitals in Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, we know for a fact that just with our community health centers, I represent 46 of them in the 13th Congressional District. We've got great hospital systems and throughout the district, quite frankly. Carl Hospital I had a chance to visit with prior to the bill passing. Each of these hospitals, and even more so the community health centers, have, 30 to 40% of their patients are able to receive health care through those systems because of Medicaid. And these Medicaid reimbursements right now that are happening, no one's making a profit on this. This is just coming out even at best. And so any cuts to that system is just going to mean they're going to be making hard decisions as to how they're going to continue to offer some of these services. The other concern I have, not just with like the cuts to Medicaid and patients getting access to affordable health care, is how are we going to continue to attract doctors and nurses into our areas to actually want to practice medicine when they know that our healthcare systems are, operating on the margins. We already have a shortages of doctors and nurses. I think this is only going to make it worse. And then not only just Medicaid, but what we're seeing is with the expiration, which is going to happen through this bill, of some of the tax credits through ACA, a lot of constituents are also taking advantage of the Affordable Care Act in order to get access to health care. We're going to see with the expiration of these tax credits increases in premiums. And that's by over, say, $1,000, what we're going to see in people's out-of-pocket costs. And these aren't folks related to Medicaid. This is a whole separate issue, but it is also something that comes out of the passage of this bill.
The Congressional Budget Office forecasts that this law is going to increase federal deficits by $3.4 trillion over the next decade. The president and Republicans reject that. And in fact, here's what your fellow Illinois Congressman Darren LaHood said last week to our partner station, WGLT.
The Congressional Budget Office that scores this bill, they predict there'll be 1.8% growth over the next 10 years. I don't buy into that figure. We've never had that low of growth. We've always had, somewhere between 2 and 3% growth.
All right. So programming note, we've tried to get Representative LaHood on the show, but have not been successful. But Congresswoman, how do you respond to that?
The Congressional Budget Office is a nonpartisan, experts. They actually look at the numbers. They have no dog in the fight as it relates to a Democratic or Republican initiative. They look at this objectively. We have seen over the course of these first 6 months since President Trump has taken office, our economy has slowed. Growth has slowed. And if, we actually think that giving tax cuts out to billionaires and millionaires is the way to solve this problem, and do it on the backs of our children and grandchildren by increasing the national deficit by $3.3 trillion. That is reckless. And, I don't see any amount of, I'm not going to cast any doubt on what the CBO has to say. I think they looked at these issues. I think they forecasted moderately or modestly what the impact would be. And I think it's not going to be offset by the spending, the tax cuts that they're doing, the growth that they're modestly projecting is going to come out of this bill. We are spending ourselves into a hole with these tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires.
You say millionaires and billionaires. I feel like you're actually channeling Bernie Sanders, which is not something I had on my bingo card for Congresswoman Budzinski. Let me ask you, were there any positives to come out of this legislation in your view, right? State and local tax deduction, maybe, which does affect people with higher income states with property taxes and so on, like Illinois has?
Look, I think that there are some modest wins for some folks that are in this bill. I think that I would give one example. I think the lower and middle class are going to see some types of tax cut relief. But the problem is when you look at the details of this bill, the tax relief that those folks are going to see through a tax cut is only temporary. The things that are made permanent are the lower corporate interest rates, the higher income folks that are going to see their income taxes reduced. Those are the tax cuts that are made permanent. And that's why I have one of the reasons I have a lot of criticism for this bill is there is some modest tax cut relief for middle class families and working class families. I always support that. But what you look at the devil in the details is that is only temporary support. I'll give you one example, Brian. The president likes to talk a lot about eliminating tax on tips. Well, that sounds great, but when you take a further look into that is really only an offering in this bill that will expire after 1 year. And then not only after that, it is capped at $25,000. So I guess, there were some positive, there is some temporary relief, But the more permanent relief and what is so concerning is that it's for the top 1%.
I want to remind listeners we're talking with Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski. We taped this conversation on Wednesday afternoon, so things are moving fast, and there may be news by the time this goes to air. But as we speak, the Senate is debating rescinding $9 billion in federal spending that Congress already appropriated. More than $1 billion of that is money for public broadcasting. Obviously, that would affect our home station, Illinois Public Media. What would losing that funding mean here in Illinois from your perspective?
Well, I'm very concerned, and I voted against this rescission package in the House in part because of what it did to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. I think that we need, one of the things I do every year is I do a media tour. I visit all the local radio stations and newspapers in the district. We need to support a robust free press in this country, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, I think, is an important part of that. But overall, when you look at this rescissions package, what is even more deeply disturbing is that this is a further erosion of congressional authority. The funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting or any of the other things, whether it relates to life-saving international aid that is going to also be rescinded, aid to Ukraine in particular that's also going to be rescinded. These were funds that were on a bipartisan basis negotiated and passed and approved. What you're seeing is this White House saying, no, we want to rescind funds that had already been approved and planned for and committed to. So this is just a further erosion, these rescission packages of what we refer to as the power of the purse that Congress specifically has, but it's really an overreach by the executive branch, which is very, very, very concerning, in addition to the cuts to substantive programs that we all really care about in our communities.
Well, if Republicans can pull off a sort of take backsies on something that, as you say, had been a bipartisan agreement, how does that affect your ability to work with Republicans on the budget and other issues in the future?
I think that's being talked about a lot in Washington right now. It erodes the appropriations process, which is what we need to get to in order to get a complete federal budget done. We could be looking at a potential government shutdown because Republicans are playing games with legislative authority as it relates to the appropriations process. Can we trust that Republicans are going to respect our appropriations process and get to a federal budget that we can commit to? Or is this something that House Republicans and Republicans in the Senate are going to walk back because President Trump doesn't like something? We're an equal branch of government. And I think one of the things that is just most very deeply concerning about these rescission packages and various numbers of legislative, deals where Republicans or Democrats, I should say, have been completely shut out of the negotiation process, is we need to come together and we need to exercise our right as a legislative branch to appropriate. And I think very concerned about the future of what that's going to look like.
I do want to stay on the public media funding for one moment. Obviously, there's self-interest here, but, Republicans argue taxpayers should not be forced to fund media organizations. There's so much more choice now than there was in the 70s when these stations sort of were initially funded by the government. How do you respond to that? Why should taxpayers be supporting one particular media organization?
Well, I think it's important that we have, I think one of the problems, quite frankly, Brian, we have right now is misinformation. We need more nonpartisan, objective reporting in this country. I think that's something that all communities deserve, and what the Corporation for Public Broadcasting offers is to rural communities along with urban communities access to that type of information. As you very well know, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting doesn't completely rely on federal funding, but it is an important component of it. And I think for an informed society, for an informed community, we should be investing in objective journalism and real information that is reaching voters and constituents. We need more of that, not less of that. And with the rise of social media and, I talk to constituents all the time that, quite frankly, don't know what's real and not real when they look at social media. And when you consider that a lot of people are using that now as their only source of information, it's very concerning. We need to get, again, I think it's just critically important we be investing in objective journalism, and that's why I think supporting corporate broadcasting, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, is so important.
I know you need to run. Last thing I want to ask you about is the talk of the town in Washington, and that is the Justice Department's decision to not release any Jeffrey Epstein files. I wonder what you make of that, and I guess more broadly, how Democrats think they, might handle that issue going forward.
Well, let me just say, this was a promise that President Trump made, and he should release the files. He said he would. He should do that. And now he's trying to tap dance around it for whatever weird reason. But I would just say, from my perspective, Brian, one of the things that is equally frustrating is the fact that what people want us to be focusing on is how we're going to lower costs, how we're going to make things more affordable. When I talk to scared constituents that are afraid of making very difficult decisions between the cost of prescription drugs and being able to afford their groceries, that's what people want us focused on. This is a really frustrating distraction. So my answer is, in short, yes. He committed to releasing these files. He should do it. And I have no idea why he wouldn't do that. I think that's very weird. But I would just also say that what I am focused on in Washington, first and foremost, are the people I represent and how I come to work here every day trying to make their life better. That's what I try to be focused on. That is what I'm focused on every day.
Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski, thank you for being with us and sharing your views.
Thank you.
More to come after a short break. Stay with us.